for giving me the opportunity to introduce this bill. This is a bill which is an amendment to the Petroleum and Minerals Development Bill, and we are calling it the Climate Emergencies Bill 2017. I've just returned from the COP23 in Bonn, and despite what I said last week to the Minister for the Environment, that I would be mortified representing the country there because of our bad record on meeting the Paris Accord, and that has been confirmed to me this morning because of the report that's been issued. I was slightly mortified, but not as mortified as I could have been, because what I found in Bonn was an astonishing level, quite a scary level of not mentioning the elephant in the room. In other words, not really calling out what is the problem that we face with climate, and that is the use and the continued use of fossil fuels throughout the world. There are many reasons for this, but I was flabbergasted by the political responses from the majority of delegates and diplomatic representatives there. Indeed, at the interparliamentary meeting, I think I was the only delegate that actually used the dirty words of fossil fuels and fossil fuel corporations. Apart from Donald Trump and probably a few members of this House, there is a widespread acceptance of the science around climate change. The Earth is now 1 degree warmer than at the industrial average, and it's on course for an increase of 1.5 degrees. The level of carbon and other greenhouse gases that are being emitted by industry and land use change means that if we keep on in a business as usual scenario, we will be locked into a 3 or 4 degree temperature rise in the future. And this, Ceann Comhairle, will be an extinction event. We're already seeing the disastrous consequences for large parts of the globe, and particularly the developing world, with the rise of CO2 levels to 400 parts per million. CO2 levels at 400 parts per million is really unacceptable and is indeed a climate emergency. Unfortunately, even if the Paris Treaty commitments were delivered, we're still on course for a 2 degree and possibly 3 degree temperature rise. Large parts of the globe and millions of people in it and entire ecosystems are facing destruction. We know already that 80% of proved reserves of fossil fuels need to remain in the ground if we're to have any hope of limiting temperature rise in line with the Paris Treaty. But incredibly, here and elsewhere, we're still issuing licences for the new exploration of sources of gas and oil. And this has to stop. We have to leave it in the ground. We have to politically name and shame the actual causes of climate change, and that is the addiction of fossil fuel corporations to profits that is driving the climate change agenda, and not the addiction of ordinary people to fossil fuels. Therefore, this bill will simply mean that while climate emergency exists, no new licences shall be issued from this country for oil or gas exploration. It's a simple measure, but a significant measure, and we will be the third such country to attempt to do so after France and Costa Rica. And I want to argue that in doing so, we could be world leaders in the attempt to deal with climate change. We saw this morning how we've played a huge role in being world leaders in dealing with marriage equality, with the great result in Australia and the role played by Irish people over there in dealing that. This country could play a leading role, and this was repeated to me many times at the conference in Bonn, that this country could play a leading role in dealing with climate change if we were to implement this simple measure. Not because we're such a significant player in fossil fuel exploration, but cumulatively, along with France, along with Costa Rica and others that may follow, we will become the pressure on the Donald Trumps and the Saudi Arabias of this world to take it serious. So it is a significant measure, and it takes as its benchmark the figure of 350 parts per million of CO2 as the maximum that humanity should seek to have in the atmosphere. Anything above that will define the world as being in a climate emergency. It's currently above 400 parts per million, and this is the first time we've been at that in a million years of the Earth's history. It's really unbelievable. And this figure doesn't come from Brid Smith. It comes from scientists and campaigners such as James Hansen and Bill McKibben, who are very, very well known among the science community. So I say it represents a small but a historic step, and I would look forward to cross-party support on it. If we can follow that up with real investment on renewable energy and public transport, we would be on course in improving our current standing as one of the world's worst contributors in dealing with climate change. But I do believe what was said to us by global scientists in Bonn, that this would be significant, that a small country like Ireland could give a positive lead in how to deal with climate change by saying we're leaving it in the ground, we're not issuing any more licences for exploration of gas or oil along our shores.
Thank you very much, Deputy Smith.